Welcome to the Benson Wealth Podcast. I take complex financial and economic topics and make it accessible to the everyday listener. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Benson Wealth Podcast. My name is Drew Benson. I'm the president and founder of Benson Wealth Management and a senior wealth advisor with Raymond James. I'm also the co-managing partner for True North Wealth Management Group, which is a platform for independent wealth advisors. I'm a formerly trained macroeconomist, and I'm currently a certified financial planner and wealth advisor. So today I had another fantastic interview with mybudgetcoach.com creator and founder, Zach Whelchel. Now, today we had an interesting discussion about sort of the art of budgeting. And I'll be honest with you, I've personally tried to do budgeting over the years with various tools. Like, for instance, I used mint.com for many years, and I often found it frustrating or difficult or hard to kind of keep up with your budget. And one of the problems with a lot of budgeting tools, and Zach points this out today, is that they're backwards looking. They're really just tracking how much money you've spent, as opposed to creating a game plan for how much money you're going to spend in the future with your budget. So planning for every dollar and in a very intentional and conscientious way. What Zach has done is he's created software and application that allows you to budget effectively. Now, here's the rub. And I know this because I deal with clients and I watch them sometimes, not always, stick to their budget. Oftentimes, folks struggle to stick to the game plan. And the way to stick to a game plan is to have a coach to hold you accountable and to help you create a vision and a mindset for your money. What I love about what Zach is doing is not only has he created the technology and software to help you budget, but he's also created a marketplace of coaches that can actually help you follow through on your game plan. So what they're doing is innovative and exciting. And if you're looking to be better with how to budget, I really think this is something you ought to consider, which is why I had him on the podcast today. The other thing that we did, we just talked about his personal story, which is interesting, and where he developed a love for building businesses and entrepreneurship. So you're also going to hear a little bit more about Zach, about his personal story, and you're also going to learn about those things that are necessary if you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur, those qualities necessary to actually be successful. So I hope you enjoy the podcast today as much as I did. Zach, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Great to be here.
So you started a company called My Budget Coach. Tell us a little bit about your business, Zach.
Yeah, so My Budget Coach is a budgeting app that connects everybody with a coach. So I'm not sure if you've used like a mint.com before, or honestly, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of budgeting apps out there. When I started this company, I started keeping a list of all the competitors, and I just gave up on it because it seems like every week something new comes out in the budgeting space. The thing that makes us different, though, the reason why I think this company needs to exist is that we connect every user with a coach. And I think that budgeting is like this really foundational, important layer that people need in their financial lives. And most people know they should do it, but don't actually do it. And so having somebody in your corner to kind of help you succeed and help you learn how to do it, we think is super important. And that's kind of why we started the company.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I think anytime you want to be disciplined with something in your life, whether it's your health, or whether it's your spiritual life, being more disciplined, say you want to spend more time in prayer, it's really helpful to have someone that can hold you accountable. It's just difficult to do things alone. And I think as human beings, we weren't created to be solo. We were created to almost to work in packs and to work in a community, right? And so it seems to be so much more in accord with human nature, which is why I really love your concept. I want to talk about, you really have two sides to your business, right, Zach? So you've got the actual application and technology side, and then you've got the coaching piece that you've coupled with it. Can you talk to us about the application, the actual budgeting software part of this? And like, for instance, I used mint.com for many, many, many years. And between you and me, I had tons of frustrations. I didn't even think mint.com's around. I think Intuit shut that down.
Yeah, Mint shut down last year, RIP, which started a huge like migration in the space of people trying to find new budgeting apps. But yeah, Mint shut down. They tried to force everybody over to Credit Karma, which they claimed did like the same thing, but it really didn't. Mint has always been like an advertising play. It was like free to use, but they were trying to, make money off of ads and stuff. So yeah, as far as like the app itself, there are kind of there's a couple different ways of looking at budgeting, and even the word budgeting turns a lot of people off, right? They're like, I don't want to budget. I don't want to be restricted. I think that like once you get into it, you realize it's not about restriction. It's about actually like freeing you up to spend your money in the way that you want. Like we always tell people we want them to spend according to their values. Like we actually, I host a podcast and we have guests come on and they don't introduce themselves at all. We just jump right into their budget and their numbers, and you kind of get to know them by how they spend, right? You get to know somebody by their priorities, because the truth is like how you spend your money is a reflection of like what you value and like what you want to achieve in the world, which is kind of cool. But our app itself, yeah, like I was saying, there are kind of two ways to look at budgeting. The first one's something called expense tracking, and this is what Mint used to be. So you would kind of link all your banks, you'd set up your categories. At the end of the month, it would tell you, you went over eating out, you went over by $200 or whatever, and you'd kind of look at it and be like, shoot, I guess we went over eating out again, right? And hopefully that would change your behavior, but typically it wouldn't. I mean, I used Mint as well for a number of years, and it never really changed my behavior until I found this other way of budgeting. The other way is called like a zero-based budget. And that's where basically you have to account for every single dollar. So you take every dollar that you own, you kind of give it a job is what they say before you spend it. And then you spend according to that plan that you have. And so it's always about looking forward instead of looking backward. It takes more effort. It takes more like intentionality. But it's a game changer. My wife and I started doing this 5 years ago, and we loved it so much that we had to like teach our friends and family. We started teaching a class at church. Like we just became like evangelists essentially for this because it made such an impact in our life. So that's kind of the side that our app falls on, is more of like the planning forward, the giving every dollar a job before you spend it.
So did you come up with this idea before you even started the business? Were you just doing this on the side with your wife?
Yeah, so there was actually a different app that we started using called YNAB, which is kind of like the OG in this space. They've been around for 20 years. They're an awesome company out of Utah. But the problem is, most people don't succeed with it, right? It's so hard to get over the learning curve and succeed. So we were using YNAB. It took us honestly a long time to like really click with it. I actually ended up writing a 30-page document of all my thoughts and like frustrations that I had, like trying to learn this software, and sent it to their CEO. I ended up meeting with their CEO. Yeah, I ended up meeting with their now CEO for a little bit. And he was basically like, yeah, a lot of this, like we hear this a lot. There's such a mind shift change that's needed in order to start thinking about your money in this way. And so, software can only get you so far. And that's why we added the coaching element. But yeah, my wife and I, we just started doing this out of fun. Like we would teach classes at our church. We actually moved to England last year, just for a short period of time, just to like see what it's like to live abroad. And one of the first things we did was ask the church over there, like, hey, can we teach this class over here as well? Because we enjoyed it so much. So yeah, I guess we're.
Did you teach? And you taught it there.
Yeah. We taught it to a bunch of 20-somethings over in London, and a lot of them like it. We can. This is a whole separate topic, but when you look at countries where there's like a much more of like a social safety net, people don't. It was kind of crazy to me to see that people didn't really take as much control of their own finances, because there's this mentality that the state will take care of this, that, or the other, right? So like people don't feel as much of a need of like growing wealth and kind of saving over time. They live much more paycheck to paycheck because they don't have this idea. I guess it's much less entrepreneurial. It's much less like, protecting yourself against things. I don't know. It was a whole interesting thing, but it was a new concept for that audience for sure.
Well, I mean, the national pension systems abroad and even in the United States with Social Security does create quite a safety net. And so you'll run into this with people where it's like, well, Social Security is just going to cover me. I'm going to be absolutely fine. And oftentimes, so right, I'm trained in economics, so I think about the unintended consequences of any sort of governmental policy. And one of the unintended consequences of something like a national safety net that you would get in England is that it creates a moral hazard problem whereby people say, well, I'm going to actually get plenty of money in retirement, so therefore I'm not going to be responsible with my own funds. Now, when policymakers create these pension systems, right, probably about 100 years ago is when a lot of these were being formed, like in the 1930s. And so when they were formed, they weren't thinking through like, what are the downstream effects to this? And I think what you experienced was the downstream effect is a level of fiscal irresponsibility within the household. But the irony to it is that all these governments have immense fiscal irresponsibility as well. And so there's this mindset, and you see it everywhere, man, is like that the government is always going to be solvent to pay your bill. What do you do if and by the way, I'm really going to go off on a tangent. I apologize.
Go for
Zach.
it. Unintended consequences is one of my favorite terms. So anytime you say that, like you've got me. Keep going.
Love it. We're on the same page, brother. So I just interviewed a guy about the Social Security system. In fact, the episode was just released. This will be out in a few weeks, but the episode we just put out on Friday, and he is essentially an expert on the system and when it goes insolvent and then what it means. And what Americans don't realize, and it's the same problem overseas in Europe, is that, but particularly for America, is that our system, Social Security, runs out of the trust fund in 2033. The money is exhausted. Now, revenue will continue to flow in. So it's not like the money's going away completely. So money will continue to come in from payroll taxes, but there's going to be a 21% shortfall. So if you're a retiree and you're planning for retirement, if you're listening to this today and you're feeling this need, like I need to start budgeting, you should also bear in mind that one of the reasons you need to budget is that there is a really good chance that you will not receive 100% of your benefit, because if the government, and this is what the scholar told me, he says, if we do not, Andrew Biggs, I was just trying to remember his name. What Andrew told me was, if we do not, if we end up covering the full rest of the bill, that 21% shortfall, it'll add $400 billion to the deficit every single year. $400 billion in excess to cover Social Security. So, yeah, this is a problem, and people don't think about, are they saving enough in the event that Social Security doesn't fully cover the bill? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't understand that. I mean, like when you get into like the macro, like, I don't understand how we can keep going into more and more and more debt, right? There are economists that say like it's fine, we can print, but I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't buy the modern monetary theory that we can print our way out of this, or we can engage in endless deficit spending. I think there's what you get is inflation, and that's what we've dealt with for the last 4 or 5 years. Is we print too much money, and now we're dealing with the hidden tax of price inflation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I say all this, man, because the reality is again, if you're listening to this, budgeting is going to be critical. And wouldn't it be great if you were self-sufficient without the need of the government? Wouldn't that be awesome that if you got Social Security one day, that was just cherry on top, but if your benefit was reduced, you're still okay, right? So talk a little bit more about the app itself. So it's you said it's different in that it is forward-looking as opposed to not being backwards-looking, because I did do Mint.com, and one of my frustrations with Mint.com is like there were really no ramifications. To your point, it's like, well, we set a $200 eating out bill and we spent $1,000 this month. Oops, oh well. So with your application, what are the ramifications for someone if they blow through their spending budget on a particular category?
Yeah, let me try to explain like how you would set it up essentially. So it's kind of like the modern version of like cash envelopes. So you can think of like our grandparents, or like back in that generation, they might have like set up different envelopes, divvied up their cash in it, and then they would take that envelope out when they were eating out. And if there wasn't any money in there, they wouldn't spend it, right? It's kind of like that. It's just a digital version. So what we have people do in the app is you link all of your accounts. So you link your checking, your savings, you link your credit cards, and it comes up with the total amount of money that you have currently that you get to choose what you're going to do with it, right? So you put in your checking, it's got 10,000. You put in your savings, it's got 5,000. But you put in a credit card, it's got $2,000 in debt. So what is that? 15,000 minus the 2 you'd pay off the credit card, you've got $13,000. So the first thing you do is you choose what you're going to do with that $13,000, right? So you set up all the categories in like the given month that you would need to spend on, and you want to make sure you set enough money for your mortgage, for eating out, for all of that. And they call it zero-based budgeting because you want to get to the point where you have $0 left that are unassigned, right? Every single dollar that you own has a job. And so you have no slush fund. There's no like, oh, well, I guess we have this much money, I'm just going to, buy this thing because every dollar already has a job. So right now, like if you're not budgeting, if you're not using this method, you go to Amazon, you see something you want, and you just like, you look at your bank account, you're like, I guess I've got, $6,000 in my bank, and I think I get paid on this day, and I think that we've already paid this bill. You know what? Screw it. I think I can afford this, and you buy it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't realize the ramifications, like the opportunity cost of what you're doing to yourself there. You're choosing to spend money that would have been put somewhere else. You just don't know where else it would have been, right? So when you make a zero-based budget, when you've already had a plan for every single one of your dollars, in order to move money, you can do that at any point, but you get to make a real trade-off decision. So my wife and I do this all the time, right? Like we blow through our eating out category. We want to go out to eat. We don't have any money in the eating out category, and we say, where else do we want to pull this money from? Is it worth it? Is it worth it for us to pull this money from, we have a kids plus category, which is like the extra fun things we do with our kids, so do we want to steal that from our kids in order to eat out? Maybe. Sure. that might be worth it to us in a month, right? Like, do we want to give up on like the clothing budget, or, maybe we pull from groceries or whatever, but like that real trade-off between two categories is a discussion that we can have together about our values, right? Do we value this more than we value that? And we couldn't have those discussions before we had a plan, because we would just look at our bank account and be like, I guess we can do it. And then we would just run out of money at the end of the month. And, those other things that we'd valued more, we weren't able to do. So it's a kind of a complete flip of the way you think about your spending, in which you sit down and pre-plan how you're going to spend. And it's flexible. You can change it in the moment, but changing it is all values-based instead of just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. And that's kind of how the app works.
What's awesome about your app is that it's dynamic. One of the problems with, say, the mint.coms of the world is that it's relatively static, right? It's you got your budget, and you could kind of wiggle it around, but it was I don't know what your experience was, but my experience was like really onerous. And then there were like bills that would pop up on the credit card from maybe a prior month. Everything got convoluted very quickly with Mint, and I got frustrated. And then what happens when you get frustrated is you quit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
We always say like the best budget is the one that you're actually going to use, right? So like even if you can't handle like the zero-based budgeting, like if you need to do something super simple, like do it. Like any form of a plan is better than no plan at all. But yeah, like it gets frustrating when you don't understand it. And that kind of leans into like the coaching aspect of things, right? Like most people try to build this habit and fail. And then they try it again and they fail again. And what we found is people just need help. They need guidance. Like even us, like I feel like I'm a nerd at this stuff. Like I love it. Like I'm out here writing 30-page documents to CEOs of budgeting app companies. And like even me, like
it's awesome. It
took me weeks to like really understand the shift. I had to watch a ton of like YouTube videos and read a bunch of articles and like kind of get there. So I just think that people need coaches essentially. And that's why we started this whole company. It's very similar to the app that we were using ourselves and how it works. It's just, we added that coaching element. And then you've got the whole other side of the market where there are people out there who love coaching in this stuff and they had no place to go in order to coach it. And we're trying to serve those people as well.
So I want to dig a little bit more into coaching, but before we go there, I do have a couple questions. So when I've done budgeting in the past, one of the things that I do is I have kind of your like very primitive spreadsheet of like my annual expenses.
Sure.
So one of the things that I'll do, and I know what a lot of people will do in general, is they tend to look at their budget on a monthly basis, right? So
Correct.
It's like, right. So you've got your credit card bill, you've got your cell phone bill. There's all the things that come through. You've got your mortgage payment, et cetera, et cetera. That happen routinely every single month. And then there's the bills that pop up randomly, like we're in New England and it's very cold up here and there's snow on the ground. Well, the way I pay my heating bill, I just pay whenever they fill up my propane tank. Now,
Yep.
I'll get huge bills in the middle of December, and then I'll get almost nothing in the middle of the summer, right? Like we could go a very long time, months at a time, without having any sort of energy bill. How do you account for two things? One is, how do you account for things that are difficult to budget on a monthly basis? And then how do you account for the miscellaneous things? I got to make a run to Lowe's, right? So we want to do a little project around the house, or maybe something broke and I need to go replace it and I got to go buy some 2x4s, whatever it may be. How do you account for the miscellaneous? And then how do you account for the things that are difficult to budget on a monthly basis?
Yeah. So the way you do that is we call it like embracing like your actual expenses, right? So like the concept of like just a monthly budget with just your monthly things, it's not holistic enough, right? So like the truth
Agreed.
is like you need to put in there a category called like propane or whatever, and even in the months that you're not paying for it, you can set aside a little bit every month. And so it becomes like this little growing fund that's ready for it when you need it. Right. So we encourage people to like set up a Christmas category, even in the January. Right. And then we say like, how much are you going to spend in Christmas? Okay, let's put $50 in there every month. So when Christmas comes, you kind of leveled out that, you know, a lot of people just want to think about things monthly. They want to level out their expenditure monthly. You don't have to do that in the system, but it's helpful too for those type of people. So put $50 a month, and then when Christmas comes, it's sitting there in your bank, it's ready. So that's the first thing is like, make sure that you create categories for all those things that you spend throughout the year and miscellaneous, and prepare for them. And then for like the Lowe's thing, yeah, like create a category for Lowe's. Like we have categories for all sorts of things, like anything that we, value or will want to do, or even if it's miscellaneous, like we have like a theater budget and we put like a little bit of money in there and it's just sitting there. And like when we want to go like watch a musical, because that's something my wife and I enjoy, like we've got money setting aside there for it. So like it doesn't need to be this like boring thing that you're only doing like those like rigid monthly expenses. Like make it fun, make it yours, like set aside money in categories for those things that you enjoy or value, or that are 6 months from now. And when you do that, like you get this peace of mind that comes in of knowing that you've prepared for everything. Like you've got money set aside for all the things you're going to need in your life. And so like for me, like it helps me spend guilt-free as well. Like when I know I've got, $50 in my like entertainment category or whatever, I can go out and spend that easily because I know that everything else is accounted for. And my like natural tendency is always to like delay gratification, save, invest as much as I can. But when I know that those things are taken care of, then I can feel more free to like spend and enjoy my money as well. So yeah, it's all in like how you set up your categories and like how you like plan for those things. But like this is not just like your prototypical monthly budget. It's more of a holistic thing that you're preparing for like all the expenses in your life.
Yeah, I what I would say when I've talked to clients about budgeting is to try to look at things to an extent on an annualized basis, right? Like that like our son plays baseball and there's expenses for baseball. We know that those expenses are going to pop up at a certain time of the year. We're not going to see it for 7-8 months out of the year, but we will see it at a specific time. And like the Christmas thing is a perfect example. You're going to spend most of your money probably in October, November, and December, right? Some people buy throughout the year, but most people are probably waiting till Black Friday up to Christmas Day. And now all of a sudden there's this giant balloon to the budget and everyone's hungover after Christmas. And life doesn't have to be that way, which is cool about what you all are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, the amount of people that'll go into credit card debt and then like January and February is like trying to pay that off. Like that's awful, right? Like we want people to prepare for the things and set aside the cash, live within your means or live below your means. And this gets into the whole like wealth building side of things, right? Like, for the last number of years, my wife and I, like when we go under in certain categories, at the end of the month, we get to choose where that extra money that we save gets to go. And like, it's so motivating to me to pull that down to investments, right? We pull it down to our stock category and then we send that money to our brokerage and it's invested. Right. And like, awesome. That's like the dopamine hit that I need in order to like, work on all these other things, because like, I know that at the end of the month, when I save in these categories, there's implications to that. Right. And that's something Mint didn't give me, right? Just looking backwards, it's like, cool, I went under, like no implications, but in a zero-based budget, you get to choose what you do with those dollars. And so, like, and for, somebody else, it might be like a goal that they're saving for or paying off credit card debt or whatever. Like for me, it's like investment. Again, my mind is always delayed gratification. That's like my default. So.
But at the same time, you've acknowledged that there are times to spend money as well. Like you want to experience those things. Let's face it, our kids are not going to be small forever. And one day they're going to grow up. And it hit me a couple Christmases ago. I got actually pretty emotional. I'm looking at my kids, and my oldest, who's 14, so we have a 14 down to a 1-year-old. And a few years ago, I was looking at my daughter, and I was like, wow, she's starting to turn more into a woman. I think she was 12 at the time or 11. I was like, this is going to end. One day, these unbelievably special times with the little ones are going to go away. They're going to go off to college. Time is moving quickly. But there are experiences that I would like to have with my kids while they're in the home. And my point to this is that sometimes tempting to say we're going to be as frugal as humanly possible and never spend any money on anything because that's the wise Christian thing to do. Where the flip side to that is we need to be good stewards of our wealth, but maybe if we were better with how we manage our money from a budgeting standpoint, we could allocate some of those resources now. Because when I'm old and doddering, I don't know if I want to be allocating resources to doing special things. And I'm worried that I'm going to wake up one day, Zach, and look back and say, I could have spent a teeny bit more money to enjoy, like I took the family to see Les Mis. That was so cool to go down to Boston to this old theater. And my kids will always remember the experience of going to dinner before, went to a French restaurant to do the whole French thing, and then we went to the play, right? And it was like, that to me was such a great use of my money. And this is where if you budget appropriately, you could do that guilt-free, right? You'd say, we plan to go to Les Mis. We're going to go to Les Mis. And we're going to pull from this category over here to do so, as opposed to, I find people fall into two categories. They either just spend way too much money, which I think is financially irresponsible, or they become sort of Scrooge-like. They just... You know the people, like they never spend anything on anything. They're constant, and their wife is always upset at them because they will never let their wife spend any money. I think two ends of the spectrum lead to so much relational conflict. What it seems like you're doing is you're striking this really healthy middle ground of how to be financially responsible, how to have overflow of resources, but also how to spend and enjoy life in a responsible, guilt-free way. Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, the end game here, like in a good life, is not to optimize your money. It's to use your money to optimize your life, right? Like, and so, like, yeah, like, have you read like the Die with Zero book? Are you familiar with that concept?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, that kind of made its way in the circles of finance people for a little bit, but the concept is like essentially, you know, this guy makes the case that you should die with $0. You should spend your money. Like if you're going to give your inheritance, give it to your kids when they can actually use it. Like spend your money when you can use it. Like he's big into like annuities and all those things. I don't know if I agree with the whole concept because like I don't want to run a razor's edge to zero at the end.
Sometimes we live longer than we expect, right?
Sure. But the concept of like, yeah, like there's utility throughout life on a dollar spent. And like my children are 4 and 3 right now. And you're right. Like the utility on a dollar spent now is like, even though it would grow over time, the memories grow as well. Right. And there's like return on investment on memories built and all those things. So yeah, like, by no means is budgeting about just delaying gratification or just saving. It's about spending with a plan and spending intentionally, right? At the end of the day, like you want to get the best yield out of your money, and that might be saving it and letting it grow, and it might be using it in a time of like high opportunity, like your children are young or whatever. So again, like we're not here to tell you how you should spend your money. We're just here to tell you that you should have a plan for it, right? Just have a plan for it. Whatever you value, bring your values to your budget and make a plan for it. Like look back at how you spent the last year and be proud of that. Like don't be like, shoot, I wish that we had allocated a little bit differently. Like be intentional, look forward, and be proud of it once you do it.
I think that's really awesome. Well said. So talk to us about the coaching piece. So obviously the application is really helpful. How do you find the coaches? How do you pair them up with people? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are like my personal bent. I'm very like free markets.
You're in good company, man.
Okay, yeah. There's a couple different ways you could do this. You could say like we want to found a company. We want to hire coaches. We want to only hire the best. We want to put them through a ton of like a rigorous process, train them. We kind of didn't go that route. We wanted to create like an open platform essentially. So more of like an Uber or like an Airbnb type situation. And so what we do is we kind of allow anybody to be a coach on the platform. And then we let kind of, ratings and reviews determine how effective they are. And part of what our like theory is, or whatever our bent is here, is that like different people coach in different ways. different audiences are going to respond to those ways in different effectiveness levels, right? And so we want people to go on and pick a coach that resonates with them for whatever reason. It might be their background, it might be like the profession that they've been in, it might be, you know, their story with money, it might be how much they charge for their hourly rate. But what we found is like people have these niche audiences that they serve, and those audiences really connect with them for whatever reason. So all that to say, like, we're not the arbiter of truth on like who is or isn't a good coach, or like what is or isn't a good way of coaching, because there's just so much difference out there in how people think about money and relate to money and all those things. So we've kind of created an open platform where anybody who loves budgeting and teaching budgeting can come and coach, and you as the user get to choose who you want to work with. And I've got friends in like the marriage and family counseling space, and you know, they've told me that like it, like in the therapy space, like part of like the biggest predictor of outcomes is just like the affinity you feel with your therapist, like more than the modality used or anything like that. And so we want to see that in coaching as well. We want people to pick somebody that for whatever reason they want to work with, they get behind, and all that. So we're very like open free market in how we approach this. We want to be like a platform for anybody to come and coach. And then also, you know, there is like some barrier to entry there. Like there's like a 6-week class for coaches to get on the platform. And so we kind of weed out the ones who aren't willing to like kind of put in the effort that way, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's a marketplace is really what this is.
It's a marketplace. And if you talk to anybody like advising an entrepreneur, they'll say, don't create a marketplace, right? Like do anything else. Don't try to create a marketplace, because trying to do supply and demand on two sides at the same time is hard, right? Like you're either going to have too many coaches that not enough clients, or too many clients, not enough coaches. And we're trying to balance that. But yeah, they say marketplaces are hard to build, and we're feeling that a little bit for sure.
Yeah, there could be some struggle there, but the dynamism that could form as well could also make you really powerful in what you're providing. Because I'm thinking like through different types of clients, right? Some clients I know that if you had a rigid budgeting model, like I'll give a for instance, I'll pick on Dave Ramsey a little bit. And there's aspects of Dave Ramsey I really, really like, by the way. He says a lot of good things. And if you have terrible credit card debt, you know, if you're irresponsible with money, he's kind of the drill sergeant that gets you into shape. So he's great for that. However, not everyone is totally fiscally irresponsible. They actually might be quite good with money. They just don't know how to spend it effectively. But if you had a specific coaching model with a specific brand or flavor of coaching, and that was your only option, I think you could turn a lot of your customers off, right? Like I wouldn't like that. Like I do not want a guy with a Southern accent yelling at me that I'm an idiot with my money. That's there's not gonna be a lot of affinity there, right? But if I have someone on there that is maybe more like a corporate coach, you know, think of some of my clients that are executives. If they had like a corporate coach mindset of a budgeting coach that could help them allocate their resources more efficiently, they're gonna jive with that. Someone else. I got clients though that will walk in with like the total money makeover tucked under their armpit, right? Yep. They're gonna jam with the Dave Ramsey drill sergeant type. So I think what I do love about what you're doing, Zach, is that you're offering different types of coaches so that they can fit different types of customers. I sort of feel like the marketplace is pretty critical to what you do. Is that why you went that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like personal finance is personal, right? So like what we found is like all the other budgeting apps, they have like this onboarding tutorial, or like you will go watch videos, but like it's so nuanced. Like your situation is so nuanced, or like the way you view money is so nuanced. And so like, yeah,
correct.
I think that, and like you just get these beautiful relationships that are formed. I mean, like I love the coaching aspect of this because I get to know somebody. I get to know like what they value. I get to see like their hopes and dreams and how they're not meeting those hopes and dreams right now because of the decisions they make. And I help them get to set up this system that allows them to see that those dreams are possible if they're intentional, right? Like have a plan, be intentional, and like those things that you want in life, you can achieve. And I love that kind of like that like pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Like in today's world, there's a lot of people that just kind of like, you know, blame the government or blame this or blame that or whatever, right? Like, and this idea that it's like, yes, like life is unfair and some people have it more unfair than others and like all those things, but like do what you can with what you have, the resources that you have, be intentional with those, be a good steward of those so you can do what you can. And it puts people in better positions where they're stronger. They can be stronger for their community, for their families, for those around them. I just love it. And these coaches love it too, right? Like they love building those relationships, and it's just life-changing when it works. And so, yeah, it's really cool to build a community of people like that. Like we have a Discord group of over 100 coaches now that are like varying stages of launching on the platform. And these are just people that care about this and helping other people succeed.
That's amazing. So talk to us practically if you're interested in signing up. What does the process look like? You go online. What are the steps? What's the cost? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, so we want to make it as like accessible as possible. So there's a free 35-day trial. Don't have to give us your credit card, anything. So you go on the website. It's called mybudgetcoach.com. You pick a coach in order to get started. So just like look through the directory of coaches, find somebody that you like. We have coaches that speak Spanish. We have coaches that speak English. We have coaches that have all sorts of backgrounds. Yeah, that's another cool aspect of this.
Awesome.
Is like none of the other budgeting app companies can serve like a different language because they have to have a support staff that does that, and it's hard to hire a whole second support staff in that language. But because of our coaching model, we can cater to different languages as well, which is cool. But yeah, pick a coach that you like, sign up for the free trial. You will kind of get an email within 2 minutes. It'll have a link to your budget. You can kind of follow each coach has kind of written like what we call an avatar, like a digital version of themselves. So you can kind of interact with, and they kind of walk you through getting set up and like the way that they would set up their categories and all those things. So all this is free. And then like, as you need help, you can message your coach. You can set up a one-on-one call with your coach. That's where the money starts costing, because these coaches, need to charge for their hourly rate, but you don't have to set up that call in order to succeed. And then once you like it, you want to stick with the software. It's either like $15 a month or $99 a year in order to keep the software. And that's kind of where your plan lives, essentially.
So when you say keep the software, like if you decide not to use a coach, you could just use the software theoretically, and that would be like $99
so like,
for the year.
You'll always have the coach there, like as an option, but like you can choose just to not interact with them as much if you don't need it. Yeah, but it's okay. Good to always know that like that person's there in case you do need it, because like life is tough. You'll run into situations or whatever. It's like even like we have like couples that'll do this together, which is amazing. I love seeing like relationships strengthen through like creating a plan together. But some couples like just want a third party in that too. Like if like money is like a tough thing, we have like to have a coach in there to meet with you and like kind of have that third party can be helpful in some situations too.
It's fantastic. What are ranges of cost? So I guess one question I have is, do the coaches charge different rates? Like, or is it relatively uniform?
Yeah. Back to like the free market bin that I have, right? Like I want people to be able to charge what they want to charge, and people can choose their coach based on that. So we have coaches that charge as little as like $29 an hour, all the way up to like $150 an hour. And again, like it's up to you as the user to choose. Like if you choose like that corporate coach that's like really good at what they do in your specific situation, maybe they charge a little bit more, but maybe it's worth it to you, right? So you get to choose.
Yeah, but the price tag is pretty affordable if you ask me, because if you think about my hunch, and you can tell me if this is true, my hunch is that the amount of savings that'll occur by utilizing a coach, like talk to us about the waste piece. I got to assume that there's tons of spending that we all do that is unnecessary and wasteful. Are there any stories on, hey, sometimes you got to spend money to make money, right? Are there stories on, I invested in that, maybe the expensive coach, $150 or whatever the price tag is, and I discovered that I'm saving $20,000 more a year, or even $5,000 more a year, $500. Do you run into those situations?
Yeah, I mean, we run into like anecdotes like that. We run into people that say like, this changed my life, or this like helped our marriage tremendously as well. Like, you find that people save hundreds of dollars even in their first month, just because you're not intentional. I mean, the amount of people that'll sign up and realize that they're paying for 3 Netflix subscriptions, right? Because they just don't touch their money. They don't look at their
too funny.
They don't look at their transactions. And so like you immediately start seeing all these things like easy, low hanging fruit. But then, yeah, once you become intentional, like it's the effect that this has on your life over years is amazing. Like I can say like my wife and I, like we started budgeting 5 years ago, and like we started living below our means, saving, investing. I mean, it's also been like a crazy great market, but like we had, situations that came up for houses we could purchase like below market rate that we were able to dive in on it. It's just been this compounding thing where now this is our third property we've bought. And, we're part of the reason I was able to quit my job, if you want to get into like the entrepreneurial side of this, quit my job and start this company that I'm passionate about, is because we've been so intentional, and we've got these properties that are cash flowing. We've got, businesses in the past we've created that are paying us dividends. But it's just, it compounds over time, man. And you might think that, just being intentional and saving a couple $100 here and there isn't going to change anything. But if you stack that over time, and it allows you to take these other opportunities, like it's huge, it's massive. Like it's allowed me to do something that I'm passionate about. Right. And, I've got these kids now. Like I want them to grow up seeing their dad doing something that he loves instead of just some corporate job that like makes me dead inside. Right. So, I'm a huge fan of it. I'll preach it, my entire life, and I'll try to help people do it, but just be intentional. And I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money. I'm just here to tell you, have a plan, right?
That's phenomenal. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. This is one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
So you've got this in you, this entrepreneurial bug. Where did it start? Did you kind of know since you were a kid? Like, did you go into entrepreneurship right out of college? Like, what's your story?
Yeah, I don't know. I think like if you ask my parents, like I've always been like the value of money has always been in my mind for some reason. Like I'd get upset with my parents for like buying me braces because I knew how much it cost. And I was like, it's not worth it. Like, don't spend that much money. Like when I was a kid, I don't know why. But yeah, I've always been entrepreneurial. I mean, there's stories of me like going to like music festivals and like selling water bottles out of the back of a truck and like making a bunch of money. When I went when I went to college, I studied abroad, and I didn't have enough money for the semester. And I went to this music festival, and they were giving like it was in England. So they were giving 10 pence per like beer cup that you turned into the recycling station. And I made over $1,000 like in like 3 days of like turning in beer cups, because I just ran the math and I was like, oh my gosh, I can make serious money doing this. Like, I don't know who's setting up these incentives, but I'm just going to go for it. And like that money lasted me throughout my semester abroad or whatever. So, like coming out of college, I started my own company. I've failed a lot too. Like I've made companies that have failed. And that's been hard. I've only had one quote unquote real job, and it was the last 3 years. I worked in a corporate job. It was a great situation, like, really stable income, like great pay. And at the end of the day, like there's just something inside of me that.
What is that? What's that feeling?
The feeling of something inside of you, or the feeling of working?
The feeling of like, I'm in my corporate job and I almost feel self-loathing.
I don't know. I mean, I
don't know if that's how you felt. I know I felt that in the past where I was in corporate jobs and I was like, this is, I felt like a fraud or a phony, or I was in the wrong dynamic. I just was so deeply unhappy. I don't know. That's how I felt. I don't know how you felt in your corporate jobs.
I think it's like an effectiveness thing, or it's like the parable of the talents. Like, I gave you this, what did you do with it? Right. And so like, I don't want to measure my effectiveness in life in the amount of money that I produce, because money is just a tool. Right. If I can use that money for something good, then sure, like good money can help me do good. But like at the end of the day, I don't want to over optimize in money, but not have an effective way to spend it that's helpful or good, or being a good steward of it. And so like, I'd rather do something that where I am taking, my talents, the things that I love and enjoy, and that maybe I'm good at, and having a positive impact in the world. And so like, I'd much rather dream of doing something like this, even if it fails, right? Like even if I fail over and over again, I think it's a better use of the skills that I've been given to try. Like I equate it to like a scientist or whatever, right? Like most scientists aren't going to have a breakthrough in their life, right? But it's still good that like scientists spend their life researching, because somebody's going to have that breakthrough and it's worth it, and we all benefit from it, right? So I don't know what it is. It's just, I just have this bent where I have to try, and to the chagrin of my bank account and the money I could be making in the tech industry and all those things, like it makes me feel alive. And I have 2 children, and I want them to look at me and see their dad alive and fun, instead of just like trying to stack money and that's it. So I don't know. I don't know how to describe it besides that, but it's just something I have to do.
It's like an itch that has to be scratched, right? This my last corporate job, like full blown corporate job, I worked for a large investment company for a while, but my last because there's an entrepreneurial side to this business, even if you work for a big brokerage. But in my last true corporate job, I was just like deeply unhappy. I love the parable of the talents. I felt like the talents. I felt like I was burying my talent. The servant was did not please the master in that situation, and that's sort of how I felt at the time. And I started like a little side hustle because I was trying to start a business, and there was just something inside of me, and I don't know how you feel about this. It was just something that's like, I have to do something that is innovative and creative outside of the traditional workplace. And to your point, I think even if you happen to make less money or you're foregoing making a lot of money, I do, not all people, but I do sense with certain personalities, they're so unhappy in their job. Like, you could pay me any amount of money you want, but if I'm going to walk away feeling like it was a soul-sucking corporate experience, there's not enough money in the world to pay me to go live that lifestyle. So yeah, it's encouraging to find people that have that entrepreneurial bug, that feel that energy when they're doing something. And the piece of your kids is big, right? Like, I often think about the fact that my kids are watching my every move, and to have a father, think about your kids, for your kids to look at you, Zach, and say, wow, he loves what he does. He's passionate about it. He has a zeal for life. Like, don't you want to emulate that for your kids? And think of the dividends that will pay in their life. That's going to be modeled for them for the next 10 to 20 years. And you hope that they continue that trend as well, so they could feel a level of fulfillment in life. Because I think, unfortunately, for a lot of people, they just sort of, my wife and I have been talking about this a lot recently. People just sort of like suffer through life. They do their job, they pay their bills, they hate their job, they don't even really love their house, they are kind of down. Think of all the people on antidepressants in the country. They're sort of down and unhappy, and that is basically the way life goes until the end of it all. And then you look back and you're like, what did I do with my entire life? As opposed to a life-giving, entrepreneurial, creative experience can just bring so much happiness and joy and richness in life. That's, I think, what excites me about entrepreneurship, is it feeds into who we are as human beings. Sorry, that was a really totally long diatribe.
I mean, that's like the Tolkien concept of, like, God is the creator. He created us, and then he created us to create, right? And like, we feel alive when we create, right? Like the sub-creation or whatever. It makes me feel alive. And I mean, I think there are seasons for everything. Like, I think it can be appropriate to take like the corporate job for a while to save up the money to do whatever. But like, on the whole, want to pass that on to my kids. I mean, we're already teaching our children like how to budget, like they budget themselves, like that type of thing. But also, hopefully, they take that and translate it into whatever they do in life. And I mean, again, back to like the utility of money, like I could make more money and I could probably benefit my kids in some way from that money. But it's an asymptote, right? Like, there's diminishing returns on how much you can benefit your kids with money. You'd rather
100%.
make less money and benefit them in other ways, like your time and your investment, like all of those things. And so, through that lens, like I'd rather optimize in that way.
Well, and the other thing about entrepreneurship that's very different from the corporate job is, with a corporate job, you are oftentimes working extremely long hours, very long hours, right? And so, yes, maybe you're making a lot of money, but you're putting in a lot of sacrifice to do that. There is a certain point with what I notice with most entrepreneurs is they start to buy a lot of time back, and they start to make comparable amounts of money. And what I view money as a way to purchase additional time to do the things that I value most in life. And I think that's a healthy way to look at money too. Because ultimately, I want to enjoy certain things in life, particularly with my kids and my wife. And if money can afford that, that's great. But if I only work all the time, even if I have all the money in the world, then I can't even do those things with my kids. And if I come home totally drained all the time, then I can't go and enjoy those experiences. And
you should read the Die with Zero book, because you're right on those lines of like, trying to optimize across your life, not just the money. But
Yeah, having a more holistic view on what money is. Let me ask you a question. So there's certain traits I think that are necessary for those that are interested in becoming an entrepreneur. What are a few traits that you think are like, hey, you kind of have to have this in you to do it?
Gosh, man. First of all, I've failed a lot, so I don't want to sit here and say like, I'm successful, like follow this or whatever. And the other thing is like, I always think it's funny when they, ask actors, like, how did you succeed or whatever. It's like asking a lottery winner, like how they won the lottery. Like you can't just take the view of the people who have made it and ask them what makes sense. Right. So I would say like, you have to be willing to try and fail over and over again. Right. I've failed a ton. You have to, man, well, I've done this a couple times now. My like guiding philosophy now is this idea of like intuition and data. So like, I try to let all of my decisions be driven by data. Like when it comes to like how we're going to change the app or like what marketing strategy we're going to do, we try a little bit and then we let the data inform it. And if we don't have data, it's okay to follow your intuition, but then put the tools in place to come back to the data. I feel like it melts away a lot of like your ego. It helps like in like group making decisions because it's not like I'm saying this is the best way. I'm saying let's follow the data. Let's find what the best way is. So being data driven, trying to like find a product market fit before you scale something, being humble enough to know that you're going to have to change a lot, and being willing to fail and try over and over again. I feel like those are big. And then just like, yeah, I mean, finding something you're passionate about is huge, right? Like, because at the end of the day, like I'm very motivation driven. And when I feel motivated by like a mission or that something's working, like that just feeds energy back in and helps me keep going. My main limiting resource these days is like, just like energy essentially, especially with children, right? With young children, like, so finding something that you're passionate about, like helps with that, because at the end of the day, like I love this concept of helping people being intentional. I love this concept of helping people be in a stronger position so that they can, serve their family, their communities in a better way. So I don't know, man. I wouldn't say that I've got it all figured out for sure. But something in there I think is necessary.
So every single person I've ever asked that's an entrepreneur, like, what does it take to be successful? They almost always start with being willing to fail.
Yes.
Right. And I interviewed another person in tech, and they told me that there should be a level of comfort with embarrassment, because the reality is like you could fail, and then there's those people in your life that have the traditional career. And maybe, by the way, the traditional career is like, I'm not saying entrepreneurship is for everyone. I actually think it's really only for a certain subset of people. Sure. We're a different breed, and I'm not saying we're a better breed. We're just a different breed. And we need people to work corporate jobs. Like we need employees. Like if everyone is an entrepreneur, I wouldn't have staff in my office here. So I need some people to not be entrepreneurs. That said, if you go out and you do something and you fail, there could be the people in your life that say, see, you should have done the traditional route, or see, you should have done it differently, or you should have gotten an MBA, or you should have gone this direction. And I think a lot of people are afraid of doing entrepreneurship because they're afraid of like the social consequences and the scorn that might come with it. And as an entrepreneur, you have to be very comfortable with like, this could totally blow up in my face, and I'm okay with that, right? Yeah, I'm okay with that. And not only am I not okay with that, but I'm going to actually go try something new. Like, I'm just going to keep doing this until something happens. Almost everyone I've interviewed when it comes to entrepreneurship has had several experiences of failure before they really experience success with a particular business. And I just find that hopeful that you could fail and still find success eventually in life. To me, that's such a beautiful thing that could occur for somebody. And sounds like that's part of your story, Zach, right? Like some of those businesses didn't pan out the way you'd hoped. When they failed, how did you feel? Like when it you're like, this is not going to pan out. Like what went through your mind?
Yeah. I mean, it was hard times, right? Like pouring your life into something for a number of years and then it falling apart. Like it's not fun, right? It's hard. But I just come back to like, it is worth it to try again, because somebody's got to do it, and somebody's going to create these new concepts. And if something doesn't need to exist, then it should fail, right? Like if there's not a need for it in the market, and like you don't want to force something that's not helpful, right? Like it might be that the type of people that want a budget are not the type of people that want help, right? It might be that, budget coaching is too expensive. Like there's all sorts of reasons why this particular idea might fail. I think it's something that's needed in the world. And so I'm going to try it because I don't see it out there, right? And if it is needed in the world, then the market will support that and it'll succeed. And if it's not, then it's good that it fails, and it's good that I go on and try something else. But yeah, I think it's worth doing that, right? It's worth trying. And yeah, it's, even if you fail and fail again, it's like the scientist idea. Like if no scientists tried at all, then we'd never have breakthroughs, right? But it's worth it.
Correct.
For the few that do and that have breakthroughs. And then also like being in this position, like leading a company is not just like all like glory and glam. Like I am like, you have to be a servant leader. You have to put your employees first. I spent years like, taking no salary for myself so that my wife and I could support like the employees in our company and past companies. Right. And it's something we do here as well in this company as we're just getting off the ground, is like we take less so that we can give more to those who are working for it. And that servant leadership it's not just glamorous to be at the top, essentially. Like you have to take it as a responsibility and be willing to, treat those around you well. So pros and cons, again, it's not for everyone, and it's not even better than anything else.
Correct.
To each their own, and do what is good for you, so that you can optimize your life. It's just, for me, for whatever reason, this is what makes me feel alive.
Yeah, this is how God wired you, and you're trying to take full advantage of the gifts that God has given you, which I think is really special.
Cool. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it pans out in the long run. But for now, yeah.
I believe in you, Zach. I believe in you.
Thanks,
we just
man.
met today, so.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for taking your precious time to come and talk with me. I learned a lot about your business, and I think what you're doing is inspiring and encouraging. So thanks for coming on, brother.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for good to talk to you.
You too. If you've enjoyed this content and you're looking for a wealth advisor, or if you're a financial advisor and you're looking to make the jump to the independent side, please message me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at drew.benson@bensonwealthmgt.com, or lastly, you can call my office at 603-316-2544. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Benson Wealth Management and True North Wealth Management Group are not registered broker-dealers, and they are independent of Raymond James Financial Services. The foregoing information has been obtained from sources considered to be reliable, but we do not guarantee that it is accurate or complete. It is not a statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision, and it does not constitute a recommendation. Any opinions are those of myself and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Investing involves risks, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected.